Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Of course, I am your host, BMR. We have a fantastic show slated for you today. Linda Eastburn joins us. She's an author, filmmaker, film producer, has a fantastic YouTube channel simply called Linda Eastburn, which is growing well over 30,000 subscribers. Congratulations. So, before we get the show rolling, of course, in Studio B, my main man from Texas, Mr. Tex Weston, sitting in as my co-host, back from another schedule change in his ever-changing work life. Thank you for Tex. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. Share us out. Give a thumbs up. Turn on your alert bells. Leave a comment after the show. Please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, Texas Front Porch on YouTube, and of course, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube. Of course, my guest, Linda Eastburn, found on YouTube as well. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, where all podcasts are found. Thank you so much for that. If you like what we have to offer to you, if you want to help support the channel, of course, the Super Chat is open, a great way to show your love and support. Also, you can become a BMR pirate. Arr! Join today and join the hundreds that have already decided to become members. What you get? Well, you get a picture of me sporting a bandana next to your name in the chat room. Thanks in advance for that. Again, you can find us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and wherever other social media platforms are found out there. Check us on our YouTube pages for events and schedule activities we have throughout the week. And don't forget, throughout the week, starting on Mondays is Texas Front Porch, 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the Eastern Standard Time. Kicks it off at 8 with the Diva Dimension with Ms. Daniel Diva. Then it rolls on into Tex and Brandy, the great show. Tuesday nights is, of course, back with me and Krista, Beyond BMR, 9 o'clock in the East. Thursdays, back here again with me and Tex, Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock in the East, followed up by the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast at 9 in the East, Monica Rollins at 11, Our True Paranormal World, or Our Paranormal World with Monica Rollins. That's all on Thursdays. Friday is back with the Blondes and the Booze at 8 o'clock in the East. Saturdays, late night. The late night show, it's taking off. It's myself and all of our team. We come to you midnight Saturdays. Check us out. Thank you for that. Sundays, Truth or Tinfoil, 6 o'clock in East with Brandy and Randy. Then Tex has something. Sundays at 7. Infamous Minds, True Crime breaks down, well, true crime. If you're into true crime, check that out Sundays. Thanks ever so much for that. Enough of that. Thanks for everybody for coming on in today. I'm going to bring up my main man from Texas, Mr. Wesson.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, Tex. How are you?
Man, you're hitting it right out of the gate, man. Ginger Paranormal. Thank you, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ginger. Out of the gate. Thank you, Rob, for being you. I guess it says. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love and support. Ginger Paranormal also has a YouTube channel, by the way. Check her out. Ginger, go ahead, drop your link if you can, or moderators out there do it. Ginger's pretty cool. Met her a couple months ago. In fact, she was in Michigan doing some Bigfooting, and she sent me some pictures, which are pretty cool. So thank you so much to Ginger Paranormal. Love you.
Hello, Krista. Yeah, I was just. I'm going to try to break out my best Conway Twitty here.
Okay.
I'm just sitting here.
Whoa, thank you. Really quick.
My mind.
That's nice, Conway. Thanks, by the way, Tex. 5 new pirates from Tex. Gifted memberships. Thanks, Tex. Appreciate it.
Well, you know, I was talking to Linda backstage, and we both have an affinity for true crime.
So I heard.
So everybody will be seeing Linda on Infamous Minds in the near future.
Well, you know, I can't think of a better guest to have on Infamous Minds. Speaking of a great guest, I'm going to bring her up right now.
Let's do it.
Let's do this thing. Hi, Linda.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing
I
good.
I don't think my attempt to serenade you with Linda on my mind worked out too well.
Yeah, well, it's always a work in progress. Text you're singing. But anyways,
No, it was a popular song back when I was young. Dadgummit.
many things were popular back in your day, Tex.
Yeah, I remember when they took the corners off the wheel and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, you're not that old. Nothing. So, Linda, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
There's so many things I can get out of the gate and talk with you about. I'll let you speak for yourself. But as I mentioned earlier, you got a new book coming out. We're gonna get into that. Talk a little bit about your channel, a little bit about your personal, maybe personal or not so personal encounters, and a lot of things that you've spoken on with other guests that you've had on your show. You and I are kind of the same. We both got out books. We both interview experiencers, Bigfoot witnesses, and other paranormal individuals, and that's a great place for everybody to go check out Linda. And you have great content. And with that being said, what in the world got you started in all of this?
Well, the YouTube channel was born from a show called Intuitive Journeys because my background is as a working intuitive. So I was teaching remote viewing to a group of people. We put out 10 shows. I think we put out more after their initial 10 shows, but that was they were kind of not going anywhere. It was just kind of, it's a few viewers, nothing outstanding. And there was a Bigfoot conference came into my area, and I didn't know anything about Bigfoot, but I'm thinking, okay, we need something a little bit more interesting on Intuitive Journeys. So I thought, hey, why don't I interview some of these people from this Bigfoot conference, and maybe, to stimulate a little bit of interest in my Intuitive Journeys show. So Scott Nelson, the linguist who analyzed the Sierra Sounds, was at that conference. I got an interview with him, went up near where he lives, got 6 hours of filming with 3 cameras, came back, put together Bigfoot the Language, and it just kind of took off. I ended up getting just an enormous following of people from the Bigfoot community. I didn't know the Bigfoot community, so this was something that it was a learning curve really fast. I had to just find people who had written books about the subject, people who knew anything at all about Bigfoot. I was just searching, social media galore, trying to find something. And I think that's how I found you. I think I found your podcast and invited you on the show. But through that year and a half since that video kind of took off, I've got now, I think, around 350 interviews under my belt. I've learned a lot about Bigfoot, a lot about the different perspectives of Bigfoot, maybe what it might be, might not be, so that's kind of how I got started in this. Now, my background is 30 years of UFO research and some paranormal research, but mostly in the UFO field. I started noticing correlations, of course, between Bigfoot encounters and UFO encounters. So that's where kind of what the book was born out of.
Well, that's awesome. And it's funny you mentioned Scott Nelson, because that's how I discovered you, because I didn't know you at all. I was just, like I always do, perusing the web or YouTube, and I saw, Linda Eastburn. And I remember Scott Nelson, because Tex and I both had Ron Moorhead many times throughout our last 3 years. And I always mentioned Scott Nelson breaking down the Sierra Sounds audio. And then I seen this, and I watched, I think you had a part 1 and part 2 with Scott. And then I'm like immediately subscribed. I said, yep. So I've been a follower and a subscriber ever since. And that's was kind of the prelude to, really doing a deep dive in your show, which is, again, fantastic. So kudos to you.
A lot of good people, a lot of just really good, sincere stories, and just lots and lots of information through those personal interviews.
So
Yeah. Go ahead, Tex.
Well, I was going to ask, what do you because I know there's no, we are now divided in basically two separate camps on the Bigfoot side of things. What are your feelings on it? Do you think there's a paranormal aspect to it, or do you think that's something else out there? Or are you in a flesh and blood camp? Where do you sit? Are
Well,
you on the street?
I think we need to entertain the idea that they can be flesh and blood and also have paranormal aspects to them, because there are just too many people have had some really strange encounters with these Bigfoot. So I think that, I mean, I would have to discount 75% of the people I do interviews with to say that they don't have some form of paranormal phenomena attached to them, and it may not just be them. You know, I think there are lots of cryptids in the world that we may not understand fully and completely. We may need a new science to understand them, but I think they definitely have a flesh and blood characteristic to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be leaving all the evidence they do. They wouldn't be reproducing. They wouldn't need to eat. I mean, there's all kinds of flesh and blood characteristics that appear to be part of their being. So I think they have to be somewhat flesh and blood. And some people never see anything but the flesh and blood part of them. And they're the ones that I think just cannot entertain the idea that there is some paranormal aspect to them. But goodness, there's so much evidence. I don't know if I can say evidence. It's anecdotal often because it's just the person's experience with them that ends up being some paranormal activity. But there are a lot of people I've interviewed that certainly had that. So I'm in the camp of, I think they can be both. And I think most likely they are.
You know, I often get razzed by text a lot because I used to say this quite often, which I kind of do not anymore. I used to say I believe everyone's story. And Tex says, "Yeah, come on, Rob's show. You know, no matter what, you know, he believes everybody." And he's just joking, of course. But you know, I have to bring this up because I saw you, Linda, on a show, and you said that you're not the truth sheriff. The truth sheriff. And, you know, I guess everyone's walks in life and their experiences are different. And I'm not going to say that, well, you're full of BS. Now, certainly, Linda, there are people that, you know, want 15 minutes of fame. I get all that. But, you know, what happened to me certainly is kind of an unbelievable story. And you've heard my story.
Right.
So it's hard for me to, you know, people say vet. Well, you do the best you can. You know, I'll look up locations. When people say locations, I'll kind of look that up and just get a general idea of where their story is coming from. And maybe I'll do a little research on it. But it's very hard to determine what's real or not when people talk to you and offer their stories. Are you kind of like me in that sense? You like, look, you listen to somebody and you don't walk in their shoes. So it's just a gut feeling thing, isn't it?
It really is. And there again, you know, I kind of take people at face value. There have been a few people I've interviewed that never made it to my show. You know, we just put the interview back to the side because, you know, it didn't feel right to put it on. But for the most part, I just put it out there and let the public judge. You know, again, you know, I'm not the judgment. I can't judge every person. I really don't even vet people. I just bring them on. We do the interview. If it feels right, I go ahead and put it on. If it doesn't, I don't. But for the most part, I really haven't run into a lot of people that I didn't feel like their story was pretty authentic. They seemed very sincere in the way they presented their information.
Yeah, it's when you sit down and talk. I guess after you do this a while, you kind of get a feel for it, you know, because a lot of people, it's not a lot, a lot of people that are just doing it for attention or doing it to get on the show or something like that. You can almost tell that they'll almost regurgitate just everything that you've heard,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I think it's one thing that you can look for, but I find it's so hard to vet someone's encounter when they were the only one there, you know. And I mean, it's like Rob said, but you know, you can take a look at where their encounter happened and, you know, kind of get the lay of the land. But then again, that's even getting difficult because we're having a lot of these suburban encounters also.
Mm-hmm.
And
One of the
we get asked a lot, why do we think we're seeing more of that? And I think it's a conglomerate of reasons.
I do too. One of the very first stories I heard was a man who would go watch a clan of Bigfoot after a school would close down for the night, and they would come out of the woods and go through the dumpsters. That was a very public setting, but there was a woods close by, and he would just observe those. So that's getting pretty gutsy on the Bigfoot part, but I think it's probably more of that happened than not. Just people don't run into it.
In your book that you put out, is that based on is that solely about cryptids or is it encounters? You mentioned 30 years in ufology. I like to talk a little bit about that today. So is the book comprised of stories from your channel or stories from the past? Is it a nice mix of cryptids and ufology, or is it more predicated at just experiences from all the genres?
It's all the genres, but it's also theory based too, because
Okay.
I have done a lot of things. And one of the things I did was I worked in the field of hypnosis for a long time. So I've heard a lot of stories, since 30 years of working in the field. So I've heard a lot of stories long before the Bigfoot stories, but they just kind of filtered into this other area that I was already working with. But there's also a lot of ideas about, the human limitation of our perception, and we should be looking at some of that as well, but also projection. That might be, holograms are very possible these days. Technologies in there, some of that, some of the idea of that mental projection. There's one story in my book about this man years ago, probably in the mid 90s, that came to me that had been part of this secret society group. And he had been kind of initiated into this group very quickly because he married into the family that was really high up in this organization. And he would not say the name of the organization, but his story went that he was taking my hypnosis class, and he said he wanted to kind of deprogram, kind of a mind control situation that he was dealing with. But he was very reluctant to tell me all the information. He was just kind of start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And we were about halfway through the class. He was the only practice student there that night. Oh, I'm so sorry. And he was very reluctant to tell me about this, but the way he talked about it literally was that they had this kind of occult sort of mechanism where they would program people into being able to receive visual things. And even though he had been out of that organization, divorced for many years, he had moved back here to Missouri. That organization was on the East Coast. And he was back here now taking my hypnosis class and kind of telling me that he wanted to deprogram and was really interested in mind control, but they were still projecting things to him. And what he was seeing were like alien beings and UFOs in the sky and newspaper headlines and seeing prophetic things. And I'm going, wow, that's amazing. Now, I was kind of a newbie, at doing this hypnosis thing. I was teaching it, but I didn't have like years of conspiracy theory under my belt. I hadn't moved into studying any of the UFO research yet, none of that. So I didn't have all of that, under my belt to understand maybe a little bit about what he might be talking about. So he shares this information with me to a limited degree. He leaves the class a couple of days later. I'm like, come down with something and couldn't teach the class that night. I asked my husband to give him a call or give the whole class a call and ask them not to come that night. His phone was disconnected. He had moved completely. Within 2 days, he had moved completely away. Never heard from him again. Now, that was just a bizarre, unusual thing. So the book kind of goes into various theories of, technology, projection, mind control, all kinds of strange things that throughout the years have kind of come across my path. So we don't know 100% for sure what we're dealing with. When you think about running into a Bigfoot in the woods, you think of it as being a rather pure experience. But then I heard this guy talking about being out in the woods, and he saw this Native American on a horse, and then it just moved away and disappeared. And he is in his mind immediately classifying that as a ghost experience, something from the past, because it fits that criteria. But when we see a Bigfoot do that, we don't usually classify that as a ghost experience. Suddenly it becomes a cloaking experience or something else. So I think we get locked into ideas about what we're dealing with. And I'm not saying that isn't the locked in portion isn't what we're dealing with by any means, but the book explores many possibilities of what we might be dealing with and kind of gives us some insight of other ideas that we haven't thought about.
And really briefly, your book can be found on Amazon.
Amazon.com. Yeah. Thresholds to Encounters. Yeah.
Very good. Tex, I can see your brain spinning.
When I want to talk a little bit about mind speak in particular, or communication, whatever you want to call it. I don't. A lot of people take me wrong because I have a legit concern. I think, and I'm not saying people aren't experiencing it. I mean, I haven't yet, but I'm not saying other people aren't. My concern is, and I know I beat this dead horse a lot, but I haven't with you. So we'll give it a few more legs. How can we be sure, and maybe you can answer this question since you've delved into it. How can we be sure that it's Bigfoot that we're communicating with, not
That's
something that is just
that's a tough one.
it's trying, because it could be something that don't have our best interest in heart, trying to get their foot in the door, and that's the invitation they're looking for.
Well, it's possible. I kind of don't go into that realm very much just because of my background experience in the field. I've never had a bad experience with this. But one thing that I do, and one thing when I teach people how to do, types of intuitive work or remote viewing or being able to understand, the telecommunication that you're talking about, it's really important that what that feels like and that it feels different than your own thoughts. And most people who just have a one-time mind speak experience probably don't have the awareness of what that feels like unless they're intuitive otherwise or psychic otherwise, where they know the difference between those two things. And that's one thing that you must differentiate. Otherwise, you're just making stuff up.
And I think it's very important to, and you said it earlier, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically to hit this up, come at this subject with an open mind, because I found it interesting what you said. The people that have only seen this, I lovingly call them critters. These critters in just the flesh and blood form tend to be in the flesh and blood camp. I do not know a lot of the stuff that I've seen. I don't know what it was. I have a feeling I know, and I have an opinion, but I don't know. I mean, I've ran into some weird stuff out in the field. I've seen what I believe was flesh and blood critters, but I've also ran into the paranormal and stuff in the same exact area, sometimes at the same exact time, and I'm trying to figure out where to put that, and getting on the hypnosis thing. I had a time loss incident where I lost several hours, and I was out in the field, Bigfooting, if you want to call it that or whatever. And I've been told by Jessica Jones remote viewed the incident, said I was abducted. And then Danielle Diva, which she's also a medium, also said that. And I don't want to be that guy, but how would if I wanted to go the hypnosis route, because I'm having a hard time deciding if I want to go, because I don't know if I want anybody poking around in my head, You know, what would you tell somebody if they were on the fence like me trying to make that decision?
Well, I think it's a personal decision, and I think if you have any reluctancy, a reluctant state of mind to do it, I just wouldn't do it. I think you have to really trust the hypnotist that you're working with. Make sure that you have the criteria down beforehand before going into that. But you can open a can of worms that you have to deal with afterwards, and it can be really scary, very frightening situation. And you need to be able to to work through the aftermath of that. So it's an individual decision. I know a lot of people that put that off for a really long time, and eventually it just becomes overwhelming to them to the point where they just really want to know what the truth is about that. Now, hypnosis, I know a lot of hypnotherapists will not say this, or at least a lot of people that work with this type of abduction work, but it's not a truth serum. Just because you see it in under hypnotic state doesn't necessarily make that an absolute physical contact experience. It could have been a lot of different things. And we don't even know for sure if these experiences are happening in a flesh and blood manner, or if they're happening in just a consciousness state. So your body may have been laying there unconscious while you're having this, dreamish like experience. We don't know for sure. Now, we know that the body will oftentimes have marks or indications that it's been moved or something has happened. Some people even have some conscious memory of those abductions. So, there is an indication that the body is perhaps absolutely abducted and taken someplace else. Where is that? They go onto a ship and it's like 300 times larger than the little bitty ship that's out in the yard. I mean, where are they? We don't understand that world very much at all. But for some people, they really want to know, they really need to know, and they can come to terms with it better by knowing. Other people, I think, just want to push that away and don't want to have that piece of information. So I think you just have to trust your own feelings about that.
You've been, thank you for that, Linda. And you've been, as you made mention at the beginning of the show, a lot of your background, 30 years, is in UFO study, ufology, if you will, I guess. And now you're doing the Bigfoot thing with your awesome channel and the information you provide everybody. So I got to ask, and I'm glad that I have somebody on the show that's got experience in both ends now, because we often hear the correlation, and Tex and I are firm believers that everything, all this phenomena is related, whether it's aliens to Bigfoot and everything else in between. Do you think there is a commonality or a link between UFOs and Bigfoot? Do you think that some people suggest that Bigfoot's a star person? Not saying I buy that, but certainly with 30 years, you've had to have come across, we all hear about a Bigfoot was spotted right after a spacecraft or some sort of light in the sky. Bigfoot appears, or vice versa. Have you come across that throughout your years out in the field and doing your research?
Yeah, I have. Not for a long time. I mean, I'd heard of Bigfoot, but I hadn't really associated it so much with UFOs until after I started the channel. And then, of course, even Ron Moorhead, saw the big blue craft above him and, around the Sierra Sound time. So there's so many different things. The one thing that I can definitely correlate between the two are during the events, there are very similar things like the missing time. Bigfoot experiencers have missing time often, as well as the people who see craft or have alien contact. The fact that there's a light phenomena that takes place. There's an unusual kind of electromagnetic field that seems to develop around both of these, along with ghost. So whatever these are, whether they're tightly related, kin to one another and working together, I don't know about that. But the one thing I do believe is that whatever phenomena this is using the same type of electromagnetic field, light phenomena, and a lot of those same occurrences happen. Batteries are drained. I'm sure you've heard of that, as well as electrical devices malfunction. And, those are in time warps, missing time warps of all sorts of. So I think there's maybe an overlay. This is my theory. Don't quote me on this. This is my theory. I think there's an overlay reality that is right at the midst of are almost seeing it, almost not seeing it, sometimes don't see it, that interacts with our world, but we don't understand that completely to understand how. And these things all come from whatever that overlay reality is. Perhaps we'll get there someday scientifically to understand that. I don't know, but I think it's been here forever. I don't think it's new. These things have always been around. I think it's just the people who interact with it may be more sensitive than other people to be able to experience it. I mean, like if I were in the room, I might not see a ghost. I might feel it, but I might not see it. Somebody else might see it. If I were out in the field, would I see the same Bigfoot that you see? I'm not sure about Bigfoot. I know a lot of people talk about UFOs and craft. They could be, sitting on a picnic table, sky watching. One person sees this enormous mothership right above them, and it looks like Detroit upside down, she says. And two other guys are there looking at us going, what? They didn't see anything. So you can't take the person out of the experience either. So there's some dynamic involved with our perception ability and what we can see and what we can't see.
That's a very good point, and we hear that a lot. In fact, I've experienced the same thing, and out in the field. Pops, I call him Pops. Gary Spike Sr. that's in the chat. He's one of our trackers that our team, on our team, and we were 20 yards away from each other, and we're having totally different experiences. Mm-hmm. It was just really strange because I just seemed to, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, that there's so many different phenomenon that we tend to run into when we're either investigating the paranormal, UFOs, or Bigfoot, that it seems like it's all linked somewhere. Now, where it is, I don't know, because it seems to me that, especially with the paranormal aspect, well, even UFOs. I mean, you have to bring that in there, because it seems to me like all these phenomena, for some reason or another, are either attracted to each other or they're attracted to the same areas. I have again, it's a theory. So don't quote me on this. I'll steal a word, phrase from you here. That maybe it has something to do with ley lines, because what we're seeing is from our research is that these very, very active areas, Skinwalker Ranch, LBL, Brown Springs, all these areas that have a lot of varied phenomena tend to, or they are in the same place where ley lines intersect. Now, we all know ley lines move, but the intersecting point will move. Maybe that's why you may be in an area, but you'll experience these phenomena in a slightly different location, and then they'll be right back in the same location as before, just because the lines are shifting and the intersecting point is shifting as well. That's the only common denominator that I can find that would explain all these different phenomena happening at the same time in the same area. So, what are your thoughts?
I don't know a lot about ley lines. I understand. I've heard a lot about that, but I don't know how they impact that completely. Does that open up some kind of a portal temporarily? I don't know for sure. But one of the things that I also think is that, yes, these particular areas, like you're talking about, we have Marley Woods here in Missouri that is somewhat like that. Right. And then there's the meadow that, Trey Hudson is researching. There are lots of these like isolated places, but I recently started studying an area about a 10-mile radius that I call it Case 841, because there's just so many things happening. And it's Bigfoot sightings, UFO encounters, animal mutilations. I mean, it's ghost activity. I mean, it's everything happening within this 10-mile radius. But the thing is, nobody knows about it because these people aren't public with this information at all. Yeah. So I have one chapter in my book called Paranormal versus Normal. If we knew everything that was happening everywhere, those places may be more available to us than we realize. We just don't have the people coming forward to talk about it. Because if I didn't know these people from this case 841, no one would know about it because they're not talking about this.
Right. Yeah, I don't like I said, and I may be just grasping at straws here, but it makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of quote unquote normal animals that use, the magnetic fields and everything else to migrate, to travel, and that type of thing over thousands of miles. You know, I don't see why it wouldn't be. I'll put it that way. But with the you said something interesting a while ago about where these abduction stories and or encounters and the time loss incidents and stuff like that, and these people recall a little bit of it, and the craft or whatever they remember being in is so much bigger than what it appears to be on the outside. And when you said where are they, it hit me, and I haven't asked this question. I haven't asked not necessarily where are they, but maybe we should be asking when are they? Because I mean, they have to manipulate time on these time loss incidents, and I mean that's possible. I think that, and then I guess you could start talking about the whole 411 phenomenon, because I think that's a when you talk about that, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a smorgasbord of things that are going on there. And Rob said something the other day that I found very, very interesting. He said that he believes that, and Rob believes in everything, but he believes that I had to sneak it in there, Rob.
I know you did.
But that the government probably knows absolutely what has happened to these people. And I had never, and maybe I just wasn't listening, but I hadn't heard it put that way. Now my question is, and I think he's right, as far as not so much maybe where the human element is involved, either it's just by human error or, serial killer or whatever. But when it comes to these that we can't explain, these toddlers that end up miles and miles away up on top of these mountains that there's no way they could navigate these obstacles, and they'll be missing for a month, but when they find the body, they've only been dead for a week, that type of thing. Those situations, I fully think or agree that the government knows what's going on. Now, my question is to you is, with all these phenomena going on, all the 411, all the stuff that we are seeing out in the field, all the reports that we're getting, do you have an opinion on what level the government is involved? Or
I don't. I haven't really had a lot of people talk about government on my show a lot. Now, I can tell you my phone's been bugged back when I was first starting the UFO thing, and I teach remote viewing. And if you know anything about, if you're good at it, if you know anything about remote viewing, you can see things that you shouldn't be seeing, if all kinds of things. And I've had, government personnel come take my class, and they were really upfront about, they were taking the class, where they were from and such. But they also, I noticed, were already really good at remote viewing. So they were there to take the class. They were there to observe the class. And they also took a picture of all of us whenever they left, which I thought was really, really strange. But so I know there's an interest, in whatever it is that we are doing. Now, I don't know what part they're interested in, because I was really new at doing hypnosis with abductees when my phone was bugged. So I don't know if they thought I was finding out things and maybe I would be sharing that, or if they just want to know who I was talking to and who the heck I was, because I came out of the blue in the UFO field the same way I did with the Bigfoot field. Nobody knew who I was. I just was suddenly on the scene and doing a lot of stuff. So I know the government is interested in this. And also, by the way, that man who came to my house on the mind control thing, I'm not a paranoid person. I just don't think that way. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's just kind of not the way I'm built. But when he was telling me the story about mind control and all these projections, there was a part of me at that point that kind of just backed away about, saying very much, because at a point I thought, is he here to inform me of this? Or is he here really, truly seeking some kind of ability to get rid of this mind control thing that he has?
Right.
And I really wasn't sure. And then when he totally disappeared, I really wasn't sure. So I don't know. I haven't had too much of that since. I mean, there has been black car surveillance in our family. And also there was this really weird situation where about the same time my phone was bugged, that my mom's phone, my sister's phone, and my niece's phone, all at the same time, we would get hang-up calls like clockwork almost every morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It was just ridiculous. And that went on for maybe a year. And I understand from a lot of the other UFO researchers, that was commonplace. There's a hang-up call process. I don't know why, but that happened for over a year. That was back in the 90s too. That was before we had, cell phones. It was before there was a lot of advertising calls, because now I might get calls, all hours of the day on my cell phone. But back then that wasn't as common as that. And it was kind of by accident that I found out. I mean, one morning I was talking to my mom and I said something about being awakened by this phone call, 5 o'clock this morning. She said, well, we had a hang-up call at 5 o'clock this morning. And then it just happened to be that she was talking to my sister and was kind of telling her about both of us getting this call. She said, well, I had a hang-up call at 5 o'clock. And then we talked to my niece and she did too. And we would start correlating that, where we would all get hang-up calls, just throughout the day at odd times, day and night. It was a crazy time. Eventually that kind of went away. But I noticed probably 10 years after the fact, I could not get on an airplane without having my luggage searched every single freaking time. And I still can't figure out why, because all I was doing was researching UFOs and taking accounts and doing hypnosis with people. But it wasn't like I was gathering this like secretive information that was, just really going to, change the world or something like that. So I never could really find out where I was a threat in any way. Maybe the remote viewing stuff, but I wasn't using it in any fashion that would have been dangerous to anyone. So
I'm sorry, Rob.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tex. Go.
You know me. If I don't get this out, I'll forget it. Right?
I know you will. Go. That's why.
I have a bad case of CRS. We all know that.
My memory's a little better than yours. Keep going.
We, our good friend Josh Turner, he's like a little big brother to me. But he mentioned sentinels when you're remote viewing to watch for them. And I've heard, I know a little bit about it, and maybe you can shed some more light on it. But we all think about when we think about being watched, when we think about being monitored, all that kind of stuff. It's always physical surveillance. I think that we just automatically go to. But I don't think that's all they're using, like the sentinels and remote viewing. Could you shed some light on that subject? Because I am not even going to try, because it's out of my wheelhouse.
Well, I think what you're referring to is, like when you're remote viewing, somebody could be remote viewing you as well. Yeah. And I haven't had a lot of that experience, but there was, after one of the, I was actually the very first remote viewing class. I taught a lot of intuitive classes, but this was the first one I called remote viewing. And the government man showed up at the class. And so a group of us later on decided, well, we kind of like to know what their intentions were. What was he doing there? He obviously didn't need the class to learn remote viewing because he was already a very good remote viewer. So I did remote view him to see what I could find out. And that was the one and only time that he was looking right back at me. Whether it was true or not, I can't prove it. But it was enough to say, okay, I'm backing out of this energy and just, leave it alone. I haven't really experienced that. I don't invade people's privacy very much or look at things I probably shouldn't be looking at, though. That could make some difference. I just am very, very respectful with people's individual privacy, and I don't do anything with that skill that would in any way harm somebody else. It's usually
Right.
to get information that would be beneficial to them or to other people, or for myself even, to get information. So I haven't experienced that. You might, though, if you were going into crowds and groups that already knew remote viewing potentially or had some idea about that. And there again, the government may be remote viewing me. I don't have any way of knowing, but I don't think I'm doing anything that would be construed as really vicious or dangerous, unless putting those Bigfoot interviews out there could be influencing the socialization of normality of Bigfoot. That does happen.
Linda, I will say this: you're being watched by the government, much like I know I am. Tex, Josh Turner, all the people who are in this, we are. I mean, whether people believe it or not, we are to some extent, some to a greater degree. I have a couple remote viewing questions, but before I do that, as part of the show, I do have to reach out really quick and thank a few people. Texas Front Porch for gifting 5 Bigfoot, Michigan Rob Pirate memberships. Thanks, Tex. Ginger Paranormal for the awesome super chat. Keith for the awesome super chat. Josh Turner for the awesome super chat. And Josh Castro for the awesome super chat. That's a great way to help support what we do. Donations, gifting, not expected, always appreciated. Thanks for showing up and showing the love and support for the channel. Don't forget to subscribe to Texas Front Porch on YouTube, Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, The Blondes, The Booze, Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, Linda Eastburn. It's simply called Linda Eastburn on YouTube. And of course, PRT's Josh Turner. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for everyone for coming on in. So with that being said, I got to get back before I forget. A couple things on the remote viewing. Have you ever, and you can take this wherever you want to go with this, UFOs, cryptids. And I'd have to imagine if I knew how to remote view, I would do this. I'm going to ask if you've done this. Have you ever gone to any of these popular spots, whether it's UFO again, or Bigfoot, or Dogman, or whatever? Have you remote viewed these locations? As an example, Patterson Gimlin out there. Have you delved into that and looked into that at all with your experience, with your knowledge?
I have a lot of the UFO encounters, a lot of the more famous UFO encounters, but I haven't done that with Bigfoot. Hadn't even thought about that until you just mentioned it now, but that would be a really good thing to do. You have to have the time and space to do it. With remote viewing, if you're going to go into it, I wouldn't want just a flash snapshot of it. I'd want to delve into it, get, kind of start from the beginning and take it all the way through the whole scenario. So you'd have to have a bit of time to do that and to really look deep into it. But that sounds like a great project.
I know there's a lot involved in that. Can you elaborate a little more on the UFO remote viewing you did?
Yeah, I looked at the Travis Walton. He's it's a very famous case. I looked at that case, and he's pretty much confirmed everything that I saw. Of course, I already kind of knew his story to begin with. The one thing that I think wasn't always clear is that he was in a very he was kind of knocked out when he was thrown back, and he was unconscious, for quite a while. I think the majority of his experience was probably experienced in an unconscious state, but more like a dream state. There again, it's that foggy, vague world between what's physical and what isn't physical. Obviously, those 5 guys saw a physical craft with light shining down. He was physically hit by that light, or when he touched the craft and was thrown back. And so there's a physical element to it, just like the flesh and blood creature of Bigfoot. There's a flesh and blood element to it. But then that thing took off and was gone. And I think it was 5 days he was aboard that craft. But was he aboard a physical craft, or was he in an unconscious state, having that a large part of that experience? We don't understand consciousness. This is part of the problem, is we just don't understand consciousness is not just tied to our physical body. It's free will to go wherever you want to go and do whatever you want to do. So did some part of his experience, propel him into that craft? His body, however, wasn't there when those guys come back. They came back to get him. And when they came back, and it hadn't been a real long time, but his body wasn't there, the craft wasn't there, everything was gone. So he did have to physically go somewhere. But yeah, I did remote view that one, and it was a really interesting one. But I'll tell you another one that you probably don't know about. This is kind of alien related, but it is also remote viewing related highly. I don't know if you've heard of Ingo Swann. He was one of the top guys in the development of the remote viewing program that later became Stargate. I used to, back in the 90s, I used to do a free intuitive night. Friends would gather and people I didn't know as well, a few people around, and they would have a question. They would write their question on a 3x5 card. I'd gather them up. If, the questions were all over the place. They could be about anything. I had no idea what subject matter was going to come up. So I had about 4 or 5 questions. I put a 4-digit number on the back of each of the 3x5 cards. I don't read the question. I have no idea what I'm going to be remote viewing. So I would connect with it, remote view I would remote view an answer to the question. I would verbalize it rather than doing that long drawn out process. Just verbalize an answer to it. And then, we turn it over and see what the question was. Well, this night was a little bit different in that I connected with this question and I saw 4 things. I saw this opening to a tunnel that went down in the ground. I saw a tower that was kind of crisscrossed and went high in the air. I also saw this unusual thing, kind of a pod. It kind of looked like a clamshell, only large. It was kind of a pod-like thing that held stuff. And then there was one other thing, and I can never remember what that other thing was. Oh, they were arches, kind of like the McDonald arches, only maybe a little wider. And so whenever I came out, I did not know my question. So I just drew those. I just drew all 4 images that had just popped into my head. Had no idea what the question was about. Turned the question over, and the question was, what is on the moon? And I'm how are we going to prove that? So when I can't prove something, I'm one of those people that just doesn't take it, and say, yeah, it's 100% correct just because I saw it. So I just said, okay, we can't prove that. We don't know if it's accurate or not. So I'm just going to put this over in the pile of, let's just keep our eyes open and see what's what. A couple of days later, I went to a UFO conference, and there was a book dealer there that dealt with new books and old books and all kinds of books, but I kind of knew him. So I asked him if he knew of anything about structures on the moon. And he said, oh, yeah, here, you need to read this book called Penetration by Ingo Swann.
Right.
And that was a book that was about these people that approached him, had him do a secret project. He did not know what he was remote viewing. He spent a month or 2 in a bunker underground, just remote viewing for these people. They paid him well. And he came up with a lot of these images, but he did not know what he was remote viewing. Ended up, he was remote viewing the moon, but he did not know that. And when I opened the book, there were 2 pages of drawings that he had accumulated from this project. And there was the tower, the arches, the pod, and the underground tunnel that I had just drawn a few days before that. So that was kind of a phenomenal remote viewing thing that was feedback for me that either I was remote viewing this book I was going to see in a few days, or we both saw things on the moon.
Wow.
He also saw alien beings on the moon as well. And they were mining and doing things on the moon. And it was a very big operation of some sort.
What do you think about that, Linda? Do you think there's what do you think about the dark side of the moon? Do you think that there are alien civilizations on the moon?
I don't know. This is all I saw. I haven't asked that question specifically in any other form. I think it's kind of likely there's something there. I mean, it's kind of interesting that we went to the moon and then we just stopped going to the moon. I think there was intentions about being there, and then we just kind of said, maybe not. I find that a little odd.
I think it's odd that, and I don't know, I'm not gonna give my opinion on this, not today. But we've all heard the rumors about we were told not to come back
Mm.
when we visited the moon for whatever that reason is, whatever the explanation. It's always been clouded.
Mm-hmm.
Did we actually see aliens? Did Buzz see an alien? They told him not to come back. I mean, you wonder. I'm not into the conspiracy theory regarding did we go there or not. I think we went there, but I think that the entire going to the moon, I think the story is a lot different than it's been presented way back when.
Yeah, that's most likely true. And, whether they're on some part of the moon, whether they cloak themselves and they're invisible to us most of the time, who knows? All I know is, this is what Ingo saw. And it's certainly, the four things just immediately popped into my mind. So I have to trust that to some degree, but I didn't have any proof until I got the book Penetration. It's a weird little book too, and it had to do with UFOs here on this planet as well. But it's kind of a funny book, but one well worth reading, I think.
I got to ask you something. Now I'm going to give you your first project because I've had this done once. I've talked to a couple psychics. And I'm not going to give my opinion on psychics. I think there's good ones and I think there's fraudulent ones, right? And you're in the field you're in. I know you have a lot of vast experience. I want to give you a project and you can work on this, at your leisure. I know you're busy as all get out about what happened to me. And I know you know my story,
I do.
but I have to tell you this though. I talked to two different psychics. And they gave me two different opinions. I'll give you the one that I think is most valid, and I want your thoughts on this. Cadillac, Michigan is where it's at. It's not in the Upper Peninsula, but it's on the West Coast, Northwest Michigan, right? And so I was put in touch by somebody about, hey, Rob, you got to talk to this psychic person that wants to look into has read your story, listened to your story, and some information for you. They had suggested what I encountered was a Bigfoot that was in the Upper Peninsula. Now, the Upper Peninsula, this Bigfoot was traversing about underground mining operations. There's a lot of iron ore and mining iron, and that this Bigfoot was traversing underground through these now defunct tunnels, is going through this system and happened to be going through this system. Then all of a sudden it slipped into another dimension or a portal, if you will. At the same time that I was at the lake looking into the wood line, in fact, my girlfriend saw it first, and then this Bigfoot appears. The psychic told me that it walked through a portal, and when it appeared at the shoreline, it was just as scared of seeing me as I was at seeing it, and it did not know where it was in its brain, and it was discombobulated. That's why it emitted that roar, that infrasound, or whatever that sonic boom was, which paralyzed me, put me in a state of seeing in black and white, and it was just, and everything turned dull, lost. I almost like time stood still for a few seconds. This one person that suggested to me that's what happened. And let's trust me, Linda, I've got many, many theories on my account. And this other one was totally the opposite and said that we were on hallucinogens, which I'm like, okay, see you later. So I knew that person was out to lunch. So what's your take on it? What do you think about that? And first of all, and again, I believe that there are mediums that do a great job. I used one back in my early 20s when I had my house that I believe was haunted. But what's your take? How do we differentiate between what a medium is telling us to be close to spot on versus somebody that just heard a story and wants to get a rise out of me? But I do think that was the best summation from a medium that I've gotten in some time.
Yeah, and I don't know how there again, it's very subjective. So I think you have to be able to relate to it, whatever the information is that comes forward. But as you were talking, it reminded me of a story about a woman who had alien contact. Okay. And see what you think about this, which kind of fits with that portal thing. But, it's like the Bigfoot may have come through a portal, but that portal may have been present. And you may have gone through the portal too, which may have been what caused you to see in black and white. You both may have intersected at a portal,
Okay.
which kind of messes up your whole perception thing, But this woman that she and her husband had some alien contact, unwanted, for a short time, and she really didn't know how to deal with it, but it was very upsetting to her in her life. They were both highly educated people, and this just happened out of the blue. It was just an odd thing that occurred. But one day, it was midday, she'd gone over to a neighbor's house to borrow something. She was on her way back to her house, walking through a beautiful, well-manicured, treed lot between the two houses. And all of a sudden, it was like she just passed through a portal, so to speak, or something that was like, she said, it was like a wall that she just walked through. And suddenly she sees this craft on the ground and a bunch of aliens out there walking around. And she said the weird thing was that she just froze. And it was like she was absent of any kind of emotion. She was just like nothing, just nothing. And she just stood there for a while. It was like she wasn't even herself. And then suddenly, after a while, I don't know how long passed, but the alien went away. Whatever this wall was, kind of went away. And suddenly she was back to her normal self. She could remember everything, but she was hysterical because she had just seen these aliens in a craft in her yard, in broad daylight. And she didn't know what to do with that, but she understood that whatever wall she crossed over definitely put her in a different state of mind, and she could see something different than what probably anyone else around her would have even been able to see. But that kind of reminds me of your situation. If there was a portal there and this Bigfoot walked through it, perhaps you went through the same portal, so to speak. You guys met up in the midst of some kind of an unusual portal situation.
Again, just another thing to further dampen my mind, right? Confuse me. But yeah, I think that's a possibility, right? Because I think that we've all, maybe not all of us, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that especially when you're in unfamiliar territory, and also this part of Cadillac, it claims part of it. Well, first of all, in the National Forest System, where this entire story takes place, is known to be haunted in sections, right? And there's known to be like sacred grounds that have been tainted. And there's a lot in Wexford County, where this took place, is known for a lot of Bigfoot and Dogman activity. And some suggest they've come through portals. Some suggest that they were conjured up by the ancient people or First Nations people of the past. So all of these things that I investigate and look into for my own personal well-being there's just so many, Linda, that it's hard to put a finger on it. Again, you just brought up something that I'm probably going to look into because there's just so much out there that we're unaware of. People walk through portals probably every day, and I think it's part of the 411, the missing. How does somebody just turn up missing, not to be seen again?
Yeah, exactly. I did an interview with Katie Page, who has, she grew up on a ranch in Colorado. And I termed that episode Colorado Ranch, but it has a lot of the same activity as the Skinwalker Ranch. But, they had Bigfoot, they had, craft. They had such an enormous amount of phenomena, animal mutilations everywhere. But at one point she turned around as a child, and she was about 8 or 9, and there was this weird humming box with lights on it. And of course, her stepdad was like, get the kids in the car. And of course, as a child, she's like, wait a minute, what is this? But she finally did get in the car. But it was like, he knew this thing wasn't like good, don't touch it, but it just things would just appear out of the blue, and then they would disappear. But also Trey Hudson has researched some place in Georgia that he calls the Meadow. You may have heard of it.
I have.
But I just interviewed a guy the other day that was invited to go out there, and he didn't know anything about this weird box or this portal in the middle of this meadow. But these two guys that had intentions of going into that box to see what that portal or whatever it is was like.
Trey Hudson.
Yeah, it wasn't Trey Hudson. It was two other guys. But this guy was there not knowing anything about this. He just thought they were there looking for Bigfoot,
Okay.
So the two guys then, go into the portal, and he's like, wait a minute, they just disappeared. They would go in this box. They disappeared. They didn't stay long. He said they finally came back out because they didn't know what would happen to them inside there. And then they said their experience was, they said it was like walking through Jello. Everything was just, like slowed down. And, it was like just a complete different feeling inside this. I don't think they saw anything else, or not that he mentioned anyway. But those places may be all over the place, and we just don't know about them. It's not like most of us are out there with night vision goggles and infrared, lights, looking around meadows and places in the woods to see if there's a portal, around somewhere.
I agree. And Tex, can you take over for a second? I got to assist my niece real quick. And so
I got you covered, man.
I know.
Yeah, I know Trey, and of course Jessica Jones, and Kristen, and I knew Grumpy, and the porthole incident is so weird because the two that went in, they're now passed. And they were healthy before, but they think something happened to them,
That could be.
And we were inspired by their research to start looking at radiation readings in the field, and we found some phenomena,
Yep.
and we found about a 2 by 2 foot area. A reading was in cemetery, and a reading somewhere between a microwave and a chest X-ray, in like a 2 by 2 area right over a grave, but only at night.
Wow.
Yeah,
What would cause that? I mean,
don't know.
very odd. Was it consistent? Did you measure it more than one time?
Yep.
Wow. That is strange.
It is, and we've gotten to where we take I can't remember what you call it now, but we measure not only infrasound but ultrasound.
Okay.
Out in the field, and what we're finding out is it's constantly there. I think it's vibration or sounds or however you want to look at it. Thank you, Josh. 5 new, almost said porchers. five new pirates. Arr! I didn't want you to miss Rob too much. But it's. I wonder if it's just the sounds naturally put off by the earth. Because it's constant. It's always there, and it spikes up and down. Both do. And of course, we're not able to hear any of it. But we know the earth makes sounds. The ground beneath us is in constant flux. We know that. And I've been kind of talking about this thing lately, about harmonics. If vibration is in the picture, if we're putting that in the equation that we're trying to come up with an answer about, if that's one of the variables, you have to throw harmonics in there, because when you hit that harmonic range in the sweet spot, things happen. But the thing about it is, everything has a different sweet spot. There's a guy from Canada, the Hutchinson experiment, I believe is what it was. If you haven't seen this, Linda, go. It's fascinating. He's an inventor from Canada, and he experiments with vibration. And this was in the 70s. His videos out there have he uses sound waves, vibration waves, whatever you want to call it, to manipulate different objects. In one video, he levitated a 16-pound bowling ball.
Wow.
He took a block of steel about this big, and when he hit the sweet spot, it became like Jello.
Mm.
It's fascinating. But if we are able to manipulate things to that point, that throws the whole, that kind of answers the whole, why are these portals showing up in random locations? Or why are they showing up in certain locations more often? Maybe we need to look at more of the geological state of things
Mm-hmm.
in these areas where it seems to be, occurring more often. Hell, it could be that could be an answer, part of the answer of what we were talking about earlier. The whole phenomenon being attracted to the same areas or being in the same areas, that could be something too. You know, um,
And it could also explain a lot of like the flaps that go over. Maybe
right.
maybe it circles the earth, or comes back around and it recycles itself somewhere, somehow, some way. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the UFO phenomena definitely cycles.
Yeah. And well, so does the Bigfoot activity in certain areas, because I don't think what we, what most people view as migration, I don't think they truly migrate. I think they have a territory that they move around in. I think it's very large territory. And that's where, like the mountain lion, or the cougar, has, I think it's 150,000 square miles that's their territory, and they roam through it. And that's why you see them different times of year in certain spots. They're making their way through the deal, so they don't run the game out of any certain area. And I think from what I've seen in my research, and of course, getting with other researchers and everything, I think that's what we're seeing. Because I think a lot of us are not seeing different Bigfoot. I think we're seeing the same ones. They just have this huge territory that they move around in, you know, um, so they don't use up the game in one spot. They don't use up their resources, which they're a hell of a lot. If they're doing that, they're a hell of a lot smarter than we are. Hell, regular animals are a lot smarter than we are. They'll naturally do that. No, not us. We'll rape it till it's clean. you know?
figure out an answer after the fact. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you get a chance, look into the whole vibration thing. I think that may take you down a whole different road. It opened my eyes to the possibility of this whole vibration theory that everybody has. They're on a different level. We're on a different level. Maybe they're vibrate. Maybe they're not so much interdimensional as they're just on a different vibration than we are. And when they hit that harmonic sweet spot, maybe when they're dealing with us at a certain point, their vibration changes, and that's why we catch glimpses of it. And maybe
Yeah.
that's only and maybe when it comes to cloaking, maybe that's what we're seeing. They're not actually cloaking; it's their vibration, and we're just seeing them phase in and out a little bit of their vibration. I don't know.
Could
But
be. People have asked me if they can cloak. Why didn't the Patty from the Patterson Gimlin field just cloak and leave? It's like,
right,
well, that's a really good question. Could be there were some young ones around and didn't want to. Could be they can't do it under all circumstances. Maybe they can't do it when their adrenaline's flowing. I don't know. But for whatever reason, obviously it didn't seem to happen in that one circumstance.
right,
I do believe younger ones were around in that film. Okay, but that's a topic for a whole nother day. Vibrations, frequencies. Yeah, I started discovering that like a couple of years ago. It's very interesting. I think it covers this whole spectrum. Really quickly, I had to go away. My niece, we're doing the grand opening for her salon, July 13th, and she's up there working her little butt off on this project. So she's here because I told her I'd help her, and I'm just so proud of her. We open up. She's esoterician. I can't say it. So her little salon she's opening up July 17th, the grand opening. I found her location and all this, doing the marketing, and proud of her. So yeah, she's up there working and listening, by the way. And so I just had to give that quick shout out to her because she's up there listening. Lauren. So anyway, though, Linda Eastburn, you got to buy her book, Threshold to Encounters on Amazon. Her YouTube channel is, of course, Linda Eastburn. Great channel. And speaking of your channel, I want you to go back in your memory banks, and if you would like, because everybody likes a good story. You've heard so many great encounter stories. And I'd like to ask if you'd like to share one that really stuck out to you. If you can maybe get into that a little bit for our audience.
Well, this is one that didn't make it all the way through, but I interviewed this guy twice. And this was very interesting that both times the interview had technical difficulties where we were not able to put it up. But it was a very impressive interview both times. It was Mike Ann. You probably know him.
Okay.
But Mike was a tech guy, and he was doing a massive project for someone else in the field. And he was in this real remote area. He had, maybe 6, 12, cameras, sound equipment, everything in this very broad range, trying to get Bigfoot sounds and visual too, if possible. So he camped out there. He was pretty remote. He camped out there for quite a little while. And this place was really remote. I mean, there was nothing around there, no interference whatsoever. And while he's there, the weird thing was, he had to go into town to get something, and he came back and he noticed this like a broadcast tower truck, or van or something that was on this real remote road. And then he had to go down yet another remote road to get back to his camp. So he noticed it there, and he thought, well, that's really strange, that it would even be out here. It didn't seem to be any towers around there anywhere. So he went back to his camp. And then he was going to meet this guy that he was recording for later that day. So he went down at the end of the road to meet him. It was still a very remote road, nothing around there. The cell phone truck, or the I think it was a cell phone truck. Anyway, it had moved down this like really bizarre private like lane somewhere, and he lost all power. He was actually sending this back by satellite to another area, all this information. That went down, his cell phone went down, everything went down. There was absolutely no ability to get this out there. All of a sudden, he's out the end of this road waiting for this fairly well-known person, and these black helicopters start going over all of a sudden. I mean, it was just like, okay, what's going on here? And this was my very first time knowing that there was maybe some kind of surveillance with this, a lot like there is in the UFO community. It's like, why? Whatever they were transmitting would have been intercepted. But whatever it was, they obviously didn't want that to go out there. But also this person that was coming to meet up with him, maybe they didn't want him to find the place either. Who knows? This was a high-level Bigfoot area. But 2 times we got this on recorded and couldn't use it either time. I mean, it was just, that's probably maybe the only time I've ever recorded anything for my show that we couldn't use, and did it twice. So I thought that was kind of an interesting take.
Yeah, you hear about that every so often about, these black helicopters, unmarked vans and SUVs, that type of thing.
I had not, up until that moment, I had not heard about that regarding Bigfoot. And then since then, there's been several times things have started coming in regarding that. But yeah.
We were out in the field one time, and one of the people that came out with us brought a drone, and one of the good ones, you have to register the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. And we're flying the drone around, our area, which is very, very active. And we no sooner landed it than we got buzzed by a very low-flying military craft.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only time I've ever seen that happen. I mean, I've never had it happen before, and I haven't had it happen since. It just they don't do that out there. But I mean, this military aircraft was so low you could read the numbers on it.
Wow.
And he just buzzed right over our active area. I don't know what that was about. I mean, maybe it's coincidence. I don't know. But yeah, it definitely made us have a conversation about it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't know exactly what all that's about, but obviously it's pretty close watch on people who might get information. It's like, what are we going to do with it? We're putting it all out there now. So,
Yeah.
what more can possibly come forward? I don't know.
And I don't think they're that worried about what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Do they look at us? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But like Rob said earlier, they look at everybody. But I think if anything out there gets more attention than most of these, if you're a paranormal researcher, Bigfoot researcher, even a UFO researcher, I think there's one thing, and you talked about it earlier, that gets on their radar very quick, and they do get checked out one way or the other, and that's remote viewing. Because any remote viewer, from my experience, from the many remote viewers that I've talked to, they'll tell you it's not 100% accurate.
Oh, no. No.
But it is a very, very useful tool. If it wasn't, the military wouldn't have done it.
That's right. There's a lot of spying going on. You can know things that you probably shouldn't know. That's the thing with remote viewing. That's the one thing that I do that I can understand that there could be some question on. What's she looking at? I try to just stay within boundaries that are very safe and not overstepping anything that I shouldn't know. I'm capable of doing that. I don't have that much curiosity toward things that I shouldn't be interfering with. But I can understand if you are good enough, if you're really good enough, that could be a problem, for anything that you can keep secret.
I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it when you're doing some remote views, have you come across something where and you're like, well, I'm leaving right now because this is not going down the path I want to go down?
Yeah. That sounds familiar. I'm not going to say that I have remote viewed something. There have been times when I felt like I needed to back off of getting any further information. But most of the things that I look at, honestly, are very private things. It's not going to be something that, it's going to be like a divorce situation. Well, what is going to be your best opportunity to make sure that you don't lose your kids, or something like that. It's very private, situations. So, I might be looking at, how the judge is going to respond, what kind of information you want to make sure you add in and leave out, and put everything on the table to give you your best opportunities. That's the kind of stuff I'm really quite good at and have worked a lot with. But I don't look at conspiracy theory things much. I've looked at the UFO field quite a bit, but nothing that I would say that's come in that seemed too radical. Nothing that I would have put out there in any way. I haven't written a book on that. This book that I have now, Threshold to Encounters, probably has more on that field of my research than anything else, even though there's not enough detail on most of that to be a problem. Now, I have looked into a lot of that, but most of that's in my private notes. So yeah, to answer your question, I have been in a remote viewing session when I felt like, you can go down this avenue, but don't go down that one, so you can look at it so far. And then I get a sense of this is probably overstepping boundaries.
Have you ever been in a situation while doing a remote view where you felt that you were being remote viewed at the same time that you're in your session?
Yeah. Like I said earlier, that one time that I was remote viewing, the guy who sat in on my class was from the military.
Yeah.
I feel like he was remote viewing me back at that moment. That's the only time I've experienced that. But I can say in that book, Penetration, Ingo Swann, at the point that he had been remote viewing the moon for quite a while, he saw these alien beings on the moon, and they were looking right at him. And he got very nervous and just backed out of that completely.
Wow. We're getting close to the end of the show here. And before I do that, I got to throw out some quick thanks. Texas Front Porch gifting 5 Bigfoot Mission Rob memberships. Ginger Paranormal for the super chat. Keith from Michigan for the super chat. Josh Turner for the super chat. Josh Castro for the super chat. Josh Castro for the 5 Bigfoot Mission Rob memberships. Scott Slay for the 5 Bigfoot Mission Rob memberships. I appreciate the love and the support, you guys. It is also I really humbled by that every time you guys do something nice like that. Never expected, always appreciated. Linda, in the last couple of minutes before we wrap it up, is there any things you'd like to tell the audience where we can find you? Any special projects going on? You're gonna be speaking anywhere coming up in the near future?
I'm going to be speaking in October in Springfield, Missouri at the X-Con. And it will be a topic much of what we've been talking about, only I will go into more detail on that case 841 that has Bigfoot, cryptids, animal mutilations, UFO encounters, aliens. It has ghosts, haunted woods. It has everything there in that 10-mile radius. I'm going to go into great detail at that conference about that. Also, you can find me on the YouTube channel. Most of that's Bigfoot, but I do have UFO and ghost interviews occasionally on there as well. I also have a group on Facebook. Invite you to join that. It's called Bigfoot Cryptid Midwest, and all of my information is usually just coming out on that group information as well. So I'm pretty easy to find. Linda Eastburn YouTube channel. The book, you can get it through Amazon. It's just Threshold to Encounters, Linda Eastburn.
And I definitely have the link that I'll have. It should be up already. It should be in this description. I will double check for you. So just click on that for Linda, because that's definitely a book that's it's on my list to buy, because the information you provide, I really think is quality. And I think that if you're into this subject matter, Linda Eastburn is a person everybody should check out, because a lot of great stories, a lot of great theory in your book, as you explained, which I think if you're into this, you got to go out and buy it, because I really think it's well worth whatever the dollar amount is that you set on it, right? So I wanted to ask, we have to have you back another time. We never even talked about, you only do so much in 90 minutes. Real quickly, I'll leave you on this for next time. Dogman.
Oh, Dogman. Yeah, some of the scariest stories on the world's Dogman. Yes, I agree.
So we'll have to get into that. We don't have enough time for that. But then again, we can't pack it all in one show. In fact, Tex will probably want you on. Well, in fact, you're going to be on Tex's show down the road for the true crime. Texas True Crime, Sunday nights at 7. And I think Linda might be making an appearance on that in the near future. And Tex also has a cool Dogman story. You got to get Tex on your show. I've been on. Jason McLean's been on like a record 3 times. Jason McLean. Jason, if you're listening, 3 times on Linda's show, come on. BMR once, Tex 0. I'm sorry, Linda. I didn't mean to, schedule Tex for you, but I used to be his agent. Then he fired me because I always promoted myself over Tex.
I'd love to have him. It sounds like an interesting conversation we'd have.
Tex, you're on mute. Final thoughts. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I got some stuff going on in the background. I didn't want y'all to have to suffer through it. But yeah, I would love to repay the favors that you're coming on my show anytime. Just say the word. I think, Rob, you need to do a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll work it out
I
down
think
the road.
because
Yeah, maybe
we just scratched the surface today.
Well, Linda's such a wealth of knowledge again, and you're a fantastic guest. One of my most enjoyable shows I've done in a while, Linda, and I do mean that. I'm not just saying because you're on the show. There's so many avenues we can go with you and your past. We could do a Dogman, and because our channels expand into all the phenomenon, and I really want to pick your brain on the UFO subject a little more, the alien subject. And maybe when your plate is less full, maybe you might want to take a look at my remote view, my experience. Not pushing you up for it down the road, perhaps, because again, I'm always searching for answers, like we all are.
Absolutely. It gives me a project to work on.
You can think about it. No rush. Hey, we're all busy people. With that being said, thanks to everybody for coming on in. Again, I mentioned everybody. Thank you for the tremendous support with the memberships and the super chats. Today is Thursday night, the Blondes and the Booze, 9:00 in the East. Check them out. I don't know who they have tonight, but it's always a great show with them. Check them out. Thank you once again for everybody across the board for coming on in. It's been a great show. And for Tex and for Linda Eastburn, subscribe to her on YouTube, buy her book. I am BMR. We're out.